Dear God, if I have anything worth saying, please open their ears to hear me. Please help me. In your name, amen. A while back, I sat down to put this sermon series together. And I looked at the life of Jesus and I picked 6 things that I thought really captured everything that Jesus did in his ministry on earth. We talked about his prayers and the sacraments and miracles and teachings and temptations and food. And I thought I did a good job of sort of capturing all the different pieces to who Jesus was and what he did while he was on earth. And then I got to Monday morning, this past Monday, and I looked at the topic. Is it on the screen? No. The teachings of God in 1 week. I got so frustrated with my past self. What am I going to do? How am I going to do the teachings of God in 1 week? Which teachings am I supposed to focus on? The ones on divorce, the teachings about money, the ones about pride, war, lying? Which ethical dilemmas are the most important? Which ones? I could probably cover 2 or 3 in the time I've got for this sermon, right? And then I thought about how the New Testament was written, and I kind of figured out how I'm going to say what I wanted to say. See, the way the New Testament was written was that after Jesus ascended into heaven, his followers spread out all over the world, and they started churches. And they started churches all over the world, and they would go to a town, start a church, wait till the church was strong enough, and then they would leave to go start another church. Unfortunately, Christianity was a baby religion. It was brand new. They were still figuring out who they were. They weren't even sure what books were in the Bible yet. And so these churches, they mean well, but they're brand new. They don't know what they're doing, so they would get easily distracted. So a lot of these churches got into trouble. And so then the leader who started the church would hear about the trouble, and he would write a letter back to that church, guiding them, telling them what to do. And that's where most of the New Testament comes from. Letters to churches who are struggling. A lot of the issues centered around the same problem, the same question. What rules do Christians have to follow? Every city, every new church, they wanted to know, which rules do we have to follow? And see, Jesus spent a lot of time talking to Jewish folks. And so a lot of these new Christians were Jewish people. And these Jewish Christians, they really struggled. They thought, to be a good Christian, you have to follow all the old Jewish rules also. You have to follow the Jesus thing, but then also you have to get circumcised and be kosher and all these other rules. A lot of people like to paint them as sort of the bad guys of the New Testament. They like to say that the Jewish Christians are the ones trying to tear the church apart. But I honestly think they were just trying their best. They had these rules. This was their life. They were trying to take the teachings of Jesus and apply it to what they knew. And laws, rules, that's all they knew. A list of do's and don'ts, that's what they needed. So now our first passage, where's my Bible? Here it is. Our first passage is from Matthew, and it's really well known. A teacher of the law, a lawyer, he comes up to Jesus, and he's trying to test him, he's trying to trick him. And he asks, what is the greatest commandment? And Jesus responds, and he says, you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and all your mind. This is the greatest and the first commandment. And the second is just like it. You should love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Now, most of us know that passage. We've heard it before. But what's interesting is that is not the only place that story is in the Bible. This is the Gospel of Matthew, but it's also in the Gospel of Mark. Now, in Mark, when the guy walks up to Jesus, he's just an innocent, honest, sincere guy trying to figure out, what should I do? How can I live best? So he goes to Jesus and says, what's the most important? What do I do? But in Matthew, it's a lawyer. It's a teacher trying to trick Jesus. And that word lawyer, it's nomikos in Greek, that is the only time they use that word in the entire book of Matthew. Why would he change that detail? Why would he specifically point out that this guy is a lawyer? He does it to point out that the church leaders are obsessed with rules. They want the law. They want to know what's the most important list of to-dos and don'ts. And it's kind of showing just how much the church leaders are missing the point. They are completely missing it. Also, notice what Jesus says. They ask him, what is the greatest commandment? What is the number one commandment? And Jesus gives him two answers. He says, this is the first and greatest, and the second one is just like it. And that word like in Greek has a deeper meaning than just similar. It means inseparable, intertwined, completely inseparable. So the text is telling us that loving God is the same as loving your neighbor. They come together. They're a package deal. You don't get one or the other. So our second reading is in Galatians. Now Galatians is one of those letters to the churches that were struggling. One of those letters to a place. And for Galatia, their issue was circumcision. Do you have to get circumcised? Is that one of the rules? Is that one of the things you have to do to be a Christian? And they went back and forth. They weren't sure. And so it says, now, before the faith came, we were imprisoned and guarded under the law until the faith would be revealed. Therefore, the law was our disciplinarian until Christ came, so that we might be justified by faith. But now that faith has come, we are no longer subject to a disciplinarian. For in Christ Jesus, you are all children of God through faith. Now, I'm throwing a lot of Greek at you today, and I'm sorry, but I just think the depth of meaning is so interesting. When it says that we are imprisoned and guarded under the law, they use this word pedagogos. I don't know if that's how you actually say it, pedagogos something. But that word in Greek, it means house slave. It means servant who had one job, to raise the children. Their whole job was to raise the children, make sure they got up, ate their vegetables, did their chores, they would walk the children to school, make sure they did their chores, keep them out of trouble. That's what pedagogos was. So what the law is saying, what the text is saying, is that the law is our supervisor. It's our nanny until Jesus comes. Until faith gets here, we are imprisoned under the law. But then once Jesus comes, we don't need that disciplinarian anymore. The law has a constructive role to play in God's overall plan. But now that role is at an end. What we have to remember is that God is God. God is greater than the law. God is His love. God is truth. God is bigger than any definition you could possibly put on Him. Rules are easy. Relationships are hard. These leaders, they sent in a lawyer to question Jesus because they wanted to know which law was the most important, because that's how they related to God. That's all they understood. You figure out what the rules are, you follow the rules, and then you're done. But God wanted something better. Our connection to God is not a legal contract. There's no report card for life. God wanted something deeper, something closer. Our Christianity, our study of the Bible, our entire life should be a relentless pursuit of the voice of God. Let me say that again. Our entire life should be a relentless pursuit of the voice of God. Imagine you sit down to have coffee or lunch with someone, and you've never met this person before, you don't know them. And so you just sit down and you say, who are you? How would you begin to answer that question? There's so much to who we are and what makes us tick. We have jobs and families and likes and dislikes, good habits, bad habits, personality, past regrets and dreams of a bigger future. And that's just humans. Who are you is a question designed to lead to more questions. If I asked you, who are you? Your answer would be, well, my name is this. I have this many kids. I'm married or I'm not married. It's complicated. I have this job. I grew up in this area. And that's just the surface question. That's just the beginning of who someone is. The question leads to more questions. That's how we get to know one another. This is how we get to know God. If you've ever been to a Bible study and you came there with a very specific question, I want an answer, you probably got really frustrated because you get there, you ask your question, maybe you get some information, you learn a little bit, but now you've got more questions. The question that leads to more questions. We don't open the Bible to get an exact answer. We're not going to get an exact answer. We open the Bible to find God. Who is God? God is love. All right, well, what is love? Which type of love? How much love? What is tough love? God is truth. Well, all right, what kind of truth? You see how every question leads to more questions. Here's the thing. A list of rules. A list of rules is easy. I get why people limit their Christianity to just rules. It's nice. You can just shrink Christianity down to something manageable. You know, you get in, you do what you're supposed to do, and then you get out just in time for the rest of your life. This is how so many Christians live. They're obsessed with finding and perfecting their list of rules. What Christians are, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. This is what Christianity has become. And then, a lot of Christians think, once you've got your list perfected, then the goal is to go teach everybody else your list. Get everybody else to believe your list. This is what Christianity is to so many people. That's Christianity on autopilot. I'm going to share something with you. I love grilling. It's one of my favorite things. Growing up, we grilled all the time. And the most common thing we used to grill is chicken, because it's cheap enough that we could have it a lot. And so there's a couple of different ways you can grill food. Now, you can paint a glaze on chicken, and it's awesome. You do this more with ham, but you paint a glaze on it, and then when you cook it, that edge is just amazing. It's delicious. But then you get to the middle, and you wish the edge, you wish the flavor was in the middle too. The inside can be a little bland. But my favorite way to grill something is to marinate it. You take all the stuff you want, the spices and the flavors and the good stuff, and then you just completely soak the food in it for hours. You just put it in there and leave it. And then when you come back and when you grill it, that flavor has seeped into every single bite. I love marinating chicken. It's like one of my favorite ways to eat. This is how Christianity looks. When it's on the surface, maybe the outside is delicious, maybe it's fantastic, but if we don't let it seep into the rest of our life, it's bland in the middle. Are we bland in the middle? Have you let God, are you marinating your life in God? I know that sounds weird, I'm sorry. but are you letting God soak into every part, into every bite of your life? Christianity on autopilot is a list of rules. The problem is that's what religion was before Jesus showed up. Galatians tells us before the faith came, we were imprisoned and guarded by the law. Remember, like a child with a nanny or a supervisor with that house slave, the pedagogos. That's what we were before. But then Jesus came, and he made it real. He took us off autopilot. He looks past your list of rules. He looks past your exterior. He looks past the do's and don'ts, the regrets, the successes. And he stares at your soul. And he sees something of value. He looks past all this fluff, all the other stuff, and he sees who you are at the core. And he says, I love it. I love it. When we limit Christianity to a list of do's and don'ts, we lose the truth. And we lose people along with it. Let me explain it this way. A young girl grows up in the church. She does everything right. She goes to Sunday school, she gets confirmed. Maybe she even goes to youth group in high school. And she's told that the church, the rules, that this building, this is where you find truth and goodness. This is the only place you can get that stuff. But then that little girl's going to grow up. And then she goes out there into the world. She goes to college, or she gets a job, or she meets other people that aren't Christian. And you know what she finds? She finds that there is goodness in the world. She finds truth somewhere else. She finds good things outside the Christian life. Now, she has no idea what to think, because we have limited God to just these walls. When she experiences God outside the walls, she's shaken. She's rattled a little bit, and most of them leave, and they never come back. How big is your God? How big is your God? Let me be even more specific. The Bible tells us that sex is designed for marriage, and that children should be surrounded by a family, and that God blesses the married family. That's something that's in the Bible. And yet, when young people do what young people do, sometimes they make mistakes. Sometimes things happen, and maybe a child is born outside of that rule. And when that young mother and father are in the delivery room, holding their child, is there love in that room? You bet. I almost said something bad. Yes. And if God is love, is God in that room with those parents? Yes, of course he is. Now the saddest part about that story is that I think that those two people, most of the people in those rooms, have no idea that God is there. They don't know how to recognize God's influence in their life. They're not pursuing the voice of God. So they completely miss out on the incredible depth of that moment. It's there, but they're missing out. God is there for them, with them. How big is your God? Now listen carefully, because there are two ways to go with that line of thought, and we have to be careful. A lot of people hear me say, a lot of people take that, and they say, God is so big, I can do anything I want. They take God's justice and mercy and the beauty of who God is and his forgiveness, and they drag it through the mud to justify whatever lifestyle they want to live. I don't know how to say this without being blunt, so I'm just going to be blunt. When I say they, I'm not talking about people you know. I'm talking about you. I'm not talking about people we can think of. I'm talking about the people in this room, us. People, I get up front and I say the law is not what we should be, the rules is not what we should be focused on. It's not what we should be worried about. And people think, yeah, forget the rules. I'll go do what I want. That is not what I'm saying. In the Gospel of John, chapter 10, Jesus says that he is the shepherd and that his people, us, are the sheep. He is the shepherd and the sheep. And the sheep know who the shepherd is. And they follow the shepherd because they know his voice. They're familiar with the shepherd. And they follow him. They stay close to him because they can trust him. And they know his voice. They're listening. It doesn't come from following the rules. It comes from listening, from pursuing the voice of God. Our life should be a relentless pursuit of the voice of God. A relentless pursuit. It's hard work. Because there are so many other voices screaming for your attention out there in the world. It takes time. It doesn't just happen. You have to try. The greatest commandment, the core of all religion, is to love God with everything you've got. Now, if you love God with everything you've got, are you going to lie? If you love God with everything you got, are you going to steal? If you love God with your entire being, are you going to cheat? Are you going to covet all the other rules, murder the rest? If you focus on God, the law gets thrown in. If you focus on the law, if you focus on the rules, you will fail. You will fail every single time. I hear it all the time. People do this all the time. Well, I'm a Christian, but I keep messing up. I keep failing. I keep sinning. If you focus only on the rules, you're going to lose. But if you focus on God, you get the law thrown in. And not just, you succeed, not just with the law, but you succeed in wrapping yourself with God, like a security blanket for the soul. Now those are some nice words. But here at Wesley, we're not concerned with just nice words. If you were to come up to me after the service and say, I do everything I can, I live my life as a relentless pursuit of the voice of God, I chase God with everything I've got, I'd say, awesome, prove it. But how can you prove love, especially love to God? How can we prove our love? A lot of people point to the rules. They point to the law and they say, well, I obey these things. I do these things. That's what I have to do to show that I love God. And that's not bad. Following the rules is a decent starting point, but then we're in danger of slipping back and labeling God with the rules and saying that this is all God is. Lost it. Oh, yeah. I think Jesus gave us the key. When they asked him, what is the most important thing? He said, love you, the Lord your God, with all you've got. Love God with everything you've got. And then he said, and the second one is just like it. Remember, inseparable, intertwined. The second one is just like it. Love your neighbor. If you're ever wondering, am I loving God with my whole life? Am I relentlessly pursuing God? Ask yourself, am I loving my neighbor? Am I loving my neighbor? One of my greatest fears as a pastor, one of my greatest fears is that you will all sit there and smile and nod along, maybe laugh occasionally, pat me on the back at the end of the service, and then you'll leave, and nothing will change. I can only do so much. I can't change things, but you can. You have an amazing power. Own that power. You can change the world if you want to. When you are faced with a problem, when you are faced with a dilemma, when you are up against a situation where you're not sure what is the right thing to do, definitely take a look at the law. It's a decent starting point. But don't stop there. Seek the face of God. In everything you do, seek the face of God. Try and find out, am I relentlessly pursuing? Am I doing everything I can? Listen to the voice. Listen for the voice. It's a quiet voice. Barely more than a whisper. It can come from anywhere. You just have to listen.